Welcome to The Giving Edge, where we delve into the power of philanthropy. Today is the first part of a two-part mini-series where we're focusing on the impactful topic of planned giving. Imagine transforming fleeting generosity into lasting impact. That's the power of a planned giving program for nonprofits. Beyond immediate donations, it's a beacon of sustainability, ensuring your organization's mission thrives for generations to come. Today, we'll delve into why every nonprofit should embrace a planned giving program, not just as a strategy, but also for legacy building. In this episode, we will define what planned giving is, talk about its importance, and then explore the key tools such as bequests, charitable annuities, and charitable trusts. We'll also discuss why people make planned gifts and the numerous benefits involved, including financial advantages and creating lasting legacies. We'll also discuss how planned giving can enhance a nonprofit's sustainability and impact. Stay tuned as we uncover how planned giving can transform lives and organizations. All right, we're excited to get started today. First, let's talk about planned giving. Why is it important to nonprofits? You all have a working knowledge of this versatile fundraising and donor engagement tool. So let's share a little bit with our audience about what planned giving is and why is it important?
That's a great question, Erica. So plan giving really is a way for people to donate to a charity and make a lot through either their financial plans or their estate plans, and it allows people to make a larger gift in totality than they could potentially during their lifetime from their normal cash flow or income levels.
The other thing I would just add, it's something you do now, so you arrange it now when they're living with them, but it's something you won't realize potentially, for years to come. And there's, different tax benefits potentially for an individual with planned giving versus outright, depending what their estate plans are. So, but planned giving can be an incredibly powerful tool, but it's something you won't realize, until down the road.
Since there is a bit of a delay from when a donor may dedicate a planned gift to a nonprofit and to when the nonprofit realizes that, what is it? Why is it beneficial to nonprofits? Why is it important for nonprofits who are usually kind of in survival mode? They're thinking about today and about tomorrow. They're not thinking about 10 years from now. Why should a nonprofit begin and embark on a planned giving program?
I know for me firsthand from being a director of development in several roles, I was the beneficiary of realizing those gifts in the time when I was in that position. And the things that it provided to us was non-budgeted revenue. So it was a boost of revenue to either our annual fund or to a special project, an initiative, a capital campaign, or gave a huge gift to the endowment. And so it's a great benefit because at least at those institutions I worked at, we didn't budget for planned giving. So it was generally a surprise. And oftentimes it was a very large gift, typically six figures and above. And as Becky said earlier, it was oftentimes the largest gift that donor has ever made to that organization.
I would also add that for organizations, although they won't realize those assets until down the line, it really does solidify your relationship with those donors. So it's really a great tool for donor engagement. And also Erica, to your point, there is always concern that if you're focused on long-term planned giving and gifts that won't be realized for a significant amount of time potentially, then the focus becomes is distracted from your annual fundraising. And what's interesting is if you look at the data, someone who's made a planned gift and has put your organization in their estate plan, typically their annual giving for the 8 years after that nearly doubles. So
Wow.
from the donor's perspective, they absolutely see it as a long-term investment in your organization, and they're more committed to it and more committed on an annual basis to support you as well. So that's another really reason why planned giving is incredibly important to focus on.
Wow, that's a really incredible piece of data that I think is really important for our audience to know and understand that. What about some trends that we're seeing in terms of plan giving? Is it something that more and more people are taking advantage of, or how do donors feel about plan gifts?
I think how we're seeing it play out in major gift strategies is a lot more blended gifts. And so donors potentially are making a gift now and a gift later if they want to increase a large contribution to a project or to an individual organization. So that's definitely a trend we're seeing in how organizations are setting up campaigns and large asks. The other thing that we've seen over the years is the rise in donor advised funds, and how you're approaching them potentially for a legacy gift when a family's choosing that vehicle. So that's another trend we're seeing. And the other thing I would just say is the online world is becoming so much a part of our life, and even people now that are making decisions about estate gifts are using online tools. And so organizations should definitely look at some really great tools that are out there that are available to make it easy for their donors to interact, to also make a plan gift.
And we'll talk about those tools in just a minute. But before we get to that, I'm really interested to hear about some of the misconceptions with plan giving, what plan giving is not. We've just heard a little bit about what it is, but what is plan giving not? And what are some of the misconceptions or fears that nonprofits may have about starting a plan giving program, or about those conversations with their donors? What can you share with us from your experience about that?
So I would say two things, Erica. What is plan giving not? Well, it doesn't have to be complicated. I'd say that's the biggest thing that plan giving is not. It can be as simple as having conversations with your donors about leaving your organization as a beneficiary of part of their estate, right? And that's literally as simple as it can get. There can be really complex vehicles for plan giving, and we can get into some of the charitable gift annuity strategies that are more complex, but at the very least, you should be telling your donors that they are able to leave you as a beneficiary of part of their trust or their estate. And that's the easiest thing to do. So I would say that what the one misconception is that it's that the plan giving has to be complicated, because it just doesn't. And I would say the second misconception that I see a lot is that plan giving is only for your high net worth donors. As Becky pointed on earlier, this is a way that your donor that can't necessarily give a gift because of cash flow levels during their life can leave some of their assets to you in the future. So it is a good tool to use to focus on all of your donor base. And it's not just dedicated to the ultra high net worth or sophisticated donor that you're constantly going to for your capital projects, your annual fundraising, and all those pieces. It really allows you to have a larger reach within your donor pool.
One other
Go ahead, Becky.
One other misconception that we see often is, to Diane's point earlier, that there's a fear that having a plan giving initiative is going to capitalize your annual fundraising. Statistically, we know that that's not true. We also know that when donors have a variety of different ways to support your organization, their engagement grows. So it absolutely does not cannibalize your annual fundraising initiatives.
The other thing I would also just add, from being a major gift officer who's had to talk to donors, it's not just only talking about death. And so a lot of staff members are very concerned about bringing up the subject because it feels scary or inappropriate. And it's not just talking about death. It's actually honoring someone's legacy and creating an opportunity where they can have the best possible impact that they could dream of. So it's a really beautiful conversation.
Yeah, and I would think as well, it's an opportunity for a donor to invite their family into the conversation about why they care so deeply about a particular organization. Why do they want to include, organization A into their estate, and invite their family and loved ones in to understand their passion and their commitment. So it kind of creates this long-term lasting legacy, not just within the organization, but also within a family, which is very meaningful to donors. People want their passion and their commitments to live on beyond them. And so, as you're right, it's a shifting of the perspective from when someone passes, to the potential and opportunity for them to, fulfill their passions long past when they're here, and share that with their family. So those are all really good points. Anything else you want to say what it's not before we move on to some of the tools that are used in plan giving programs? No, I think we covered that. All right, so then let's just jump into some of the tools. And I think this is also one of the pieces that is scary for, newbies, if you will, in the plan giving space. There's lots of terms that get thrown around: bequests and charitable gift annuities and trusts. And we'd love to hear a little bit more about the tools. But before we jump into that, I'd love us to all talk about what is the motivation. We just touched on that a little bit, for someone to make a plan gift. But what are some of we know the benefits to a nonprofit, but what are some of the benefits to our donors? We talked about kind of leaving a legacy, but more than that, if we're making the case for a plan gift to a donor, what are some things we can say that's a benefit to them?
So I'll kick that off, and I do want to talk a little bit more about the legacy. We see on a continuous basis when a plan gift, if we've been a part of the process up front to put the structure together and have the dialogue around what's important to the donor, we've seen a number of those come to fruition over the last couple of years. And what it's really brought to light for the organizations that are the beneficiaries of these plan gifts is the peace of mind and the pride that the family has after the passing of a loved one, because they were able now to execute on honoring the gift. And they have this kind of sense of calm and just true pride about being able to honor the loved one that's gone through this particular planned gift that already has been detailed. We already know what it's going to go do, how it's going to impact an organization. So it's a really powerful experience for somebody to go through. Additionally, benefits for donors with plan giving truly is making a larger impact, right? We've talked about that a couple of times already today, but making an impact larger than a check that they can write while they're living. There's also estate planning reasons for making a charitable gift through a donation, a plan gift, where you're moving potentially taxable assets out of your taxable estate and earmarking them for a charitable cause. So there's a number of different tax-related reasons that a donor might want to engage in a planned gift.
I was just going to add too, I find oftentimes, again, being in a situation where, being surprised. So we didn't get to have the conversation with the donor, and no one did. And they just, it was part of their planning process and we didn't get to participate in it. But so, in those situations, what was important to that donor is that there was a connection to the organization and that they wanted to keep that connection, going. And so, continued stewardship and engagement and how you do that with donors is so important, because oftentimes you won't even know that someone's done that. And so for them, what's important is just maintaining that connection.
Well, that's great. So, now that we kind of know a little bit more about what, in a nutshell, what plan giving is, what it's not, and some of the benefits to our donors that we're working with, what are some of the tools? As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of names, and for those of us that, are in the world of development, we're in the world of fundraising and donor engagement and relationship building. Some of the names of these tools are a little intimidating. We don't necessarily know exactly what they are and how they benefit our donors. And I think that's intimidating to some, and that I need to be an expert with all of these tools before I can talk to somebody about it. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about what some of those kind of top tools are, and also your advice, particularly Diane and Becky, to nonprofit fundraisers about maybe allaying some of those fears.
Absolutely, Erica. I would start by saying, like I said before, the basics of plan giving would be leaving language in your estate plan that dedicates a certain asset or several assets to an organization. So really any asset can be gifted and left to an organization in a family's estate plan. So the number one thing I would say to organizations is make sure that you have a really strong investment policy and gift acceptance policy. So there are certain gifts that aren't necessarily beneficial to the organization. So we want to stick with things like real estate and assets that are in stock or bond accounts, any retirement accounts, some of the more simple things like that. Appreciated gifts of stock are absolutely a giftable asset. One of the best assets to gift to a nonprofit and to not pass on to your heirs is actually a retirement account, because when those accounts are passed on, under current tax law, they have to be spent down within the 10 years after they're given. And so when a child of the donor receives that, that can, at the very least, it creates a taxable event for the beneficiary, but it also can kick them into the next tax bracket depending on the size of that account and whatnot. So when we're thinking about the types of assets that are really beneficial to leave to organizations, I would absolutely start with talking to your donors about their retirement accounts and what the plan is for their whoever's going to inherit their estate, what the plan is for a retirement account. So as simple as language in your estate, and it can get as complicated as charitable trust. And with charitable trust, you obviously have trust attorneys involved, and you're getting into the more complex nuts and bolts of structure. So that's not a job that will solely fall on the development team's desk. But one gift that technically would fall under planned giving would be a charitable gift annuity. And it is a more complex structured product. And I highly recommend having a team in place that can help you with it, because it's very difficult for a lot of organizations to have the staff in place to be able to administer a gift like a charitable gift annuity. And essentially the benefits of a charitable gift annuity is the donor is able to transfer the assets to the organization and have a tax benefit upfront. And then they get reoccurring income for life off of that gift. So the organization is then paying them income off of their gift, and whatever the residual is left over after the donor passes is what the gift actually ends up being for the organization. So the administration of that can be complicated, and then also structuring the gift for the donor can be complicated as well. It depends on the donor's age, and it's dependent upon their tax bracket and a lot of variables. So I would definitely recommend having a team in place that can help you with that. Our firm does have a turnkey solution for charitable gift annuities and some of the more complex charitable gift options. So we, of course, are a resource for organizations. We see at larger universities, that's all managed in-house. And so I think with smaller organizations, there's a lot of fear around the complexity of some of these gifts, but to Lela's point, there's a lot of options out there for help when it comes to educating yourself on the different types of products and also finding a team to help you facilitate the gift.
Wow. Excuse me.
Erica, I was going to add just other tools and resources, particularly as Diane was mentioning, for smaller to medium-sized organizations. It's also important to recruit people to your board and your development committee that are experts in those fields. So then you have access to pick up the phone as the director of development, like, I just came back from a lunch, I had this conversation, what do I do? So it's good to keep those resources as volunteers, because many small and medium-sized organizations can't necessarily afford to staff up or pay for the resources that are available. But there are a lot of individuals that would be interested in serving on your board that also have an interest in your mission.
That's great. Excuse me. That's really interesting information. What are some of the benefits to nonprofits? I know we talked about that at the very beginning. Excuse me. I know we talked about that at the very beginning, but let's talk a little bit more and expand about that in terms of impact for nonprofits of seeing these types of gifts come in.
So I think Lela has seen it in her hands-on experience, and I think it's wonderful for any executive director of an organization who had someone before them that really put the work into planned giving, because it literally feels like, we've heard from the organizations we work with, it feels like dollars are literally falling from the sky. And it's the essential piece to long-term sustainability. It's the way that you get past the annual fund. It's the way that you ensure that your services are going to be provided to the next generation and the generation after that for all of these issues that won't be eradicated. So it allows organizations to expand their impact, and the work you do today sets the next person up for huge success. And then it's easier to recruit really good talent when you know you have these tools in place to rely on, and you know that there will be large sums of money coming down the line to support the organization for years to come. So the benefits are really endless, but those are a couple of them.
I would think it would also demonstrate sophistication to your donors when you can talk about your plan giving program, and even as small as it may be, as simple as it may be, that you do have an investment policy, you do have a gift acceptance policy, you do have experts that you can go to regarding plan gifts, and you are able to have even a 30,000-foot view conversation with them about these tools. It really levels up an organization's professionalism and sophistication in the mind of the donor. No matter how small of an organization you are, it's important to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. And if you aren't the expert, you have experts in your pocket that can guide and assist and help that donor support you as an organization. You don't need to be a gigantic hospital or university to utilize these tools. In fact, we recommend that you don't wait until you get bigger to do this. That's how you get bigger, right? You need to start now. Anything else that you want to talk about that regarding donor engagement? I know we touched on that, or increased impact, before we wrap up this first part of our plan giving series.
So one other thing I would say, Erica, is when someone has made the commitment, it isn't something that's important to consider. Is it's not dollars that you can depend on. And it's important to understand that you need to keep the donor engagement alive for their entire life. A lot of estate plans change in the last 10 years of a person's life. Health deteriorates, other people get involved, and if other family members aren't aware of the intention or the importance of the organization to that person, then these plans can change. So it's not just putting in the time, getting the agreement, or having someone let you know that they put you in their estate plan. It's really fostering that relationship for the rest of their life. That's also how you help gain support with your annual fundraising as well from that type of donor. And I would also say that having these types of vehicles, I know we touched on it before, but it really does open up the donor pool and to the different types of donors that can support your organization. And a lot of fundraisers at universities, especially with charitable gift annuities, they call it the teacher's plan gift, because it is something where they're committing whatever the residual amount is of the gift to the organization, and they have income for life that they can rely on, and that honestly they need, but they're still able to make a charitable intention with their assets. So it really does open up your organization to support from donors that you wouldn't typically think of.
Which means it's important for development offices and nonprofits to recognize this and really level up their stewardship programs with their donors, which I know we'll talk about in part 2, which will follow this, but really it helps solidify the need to close the circle of that donor engagement and gift cycle, right? Which includes that stewardship.
This made me think of just a few instances, stories, real experiences that I've had. And, oftentimes, to Diane's point, the long-term stewardship was critical to the ultimate realization of the gift. And oftentimes towards the latter part of a donor's life, we were engaging with, a second or third spouse or partner, children, many cases. And so we weren't even interacting with the donor in particular anymore, because they weren't necessarily up to having those conversations. So it almost became a family affair, and we would invite the whole family to luncheons and annual events, and they became a part of the Christmas card mailing or whatever it is that you do. So thinking about not just the donor, but everything that might, and even the estate planners and their lawyers and all those people.
Yeah, and I think we might talk about that in our next episode as well. But who are those experts, and how do you kind of build your team, and what that looks like? So excited to kind of wrap this conversation up so we can We'll have another conversation where we'll talk a little bit more about plan giving. In that episode, we're going to discuss kind of common pitfalls for starting your program, as well as plan giving essentials, necessary policies and procedures, and then donor stewardship, which obviously we've touched on a little bit here, but I think we'll go into a little bit more detail. And as we close with this episode, as with all of our episodes, if you want to discuss any of the points that we've made here today, you simply want to level up your fundraising and organizational impact investing, we are here. Pivot Creative and Consulting, as well as endowment partners, are always available to talk to you and work with you to help you meet your organizational goals. We have QR codes at the end of this conversation and our email addresses, and we really do look forward to helping you and your organization reach new heights. So with that, thank you so much, ladies, and we'll close out today's episode.